Not to mention that we could be seeing sanctions against Russian energy exports. What are you expecting on that front, and especially when it comes to gas prices as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're already seeing gas prices at record levels in Europe, close to $40 an MMBTU. That's $240 a barrel equivalent. So really unprecedented levels of gas price in Europe. And it really reflects, the dependency that Europe has on Russia. 30% of the supply comes from Russia. And of the Russian supply, roughly 25% of that comes through Ukraine. So if there's any disruption to those pipelines, it's going to have a significant impact on European gas. In terms of physical disruption or disruption to date, what we're seeing at the moment is obviously unprecedented action by European countries to sanction Russian banks and remove some of the Russian banks from the SWIFT system. Sberbank and Gazprom Bank, which are really key to oil and gas payments, have not been removed from the SWIFT system. So we can still have payments allowed, and that will keep the oil and gas flowing in the short term. But for a number of other buyers, it's going to be increasingly difficult.
Neil, do you at this point look at the long-term impact, though, because we might be seeing these commodities prices surging, oil and gas, but at the same time, perhaps the Russian invasion of Ukraine is setting up for all of these countries to veer away from Russian oil and gas and start to transition even faster towards green energy?
I think that's a great question. I mean, as we see this invasion, really enter into, potentially protracted period, I think the risks are that increasingly Russia is going to be marginalized, from the rest of the world, cut off. And that's very significant because Russia, is the biggest energy exporter in the world, 10 million barrels a day, or 10% of world oil supply, the largest gas exporter in the world. And in the short term, there's nothing that really can be done to make up for the sort of volumes that Russia provides. So it would lead to significantly higher energy prices. I think the lesson from this is going to be a pivot harder towards renewables, but that will take time. In the short term, I think we could be looking at sustained higher prices as Russia gets marginalized.
And the inflation picture complicates the transition as well, right, in terms of being able to build out the infrastructure. What can policy do to be able to alleviate some of these pressure points?
Well, I think there's very, little that can be done on the inflationary side. I think that what governments need to do is continue to really support, some of the key solar, wind industries, hydrogen. We are seeing some countries, Germany, talking again about, nuclear. And so I think policy support, certainly in areas like hydrogen, is going to be absolutely critical in developing those industries. But, again, this is going to take time to really put in the infrastructure, that's required for that pivot away from fossil fuels. It's going to take decades to do this, not years. And in the short term, I think the key issue is that, the underinvestment that we've seen in oil and gas leading into this energy transition, coupled with the geopolitical crisis, is really creating the energy crisis that we're seeing today.
Who is really vulnerable in this part of the world, in Asia, I should say, because obviously some of the big oil importers like China are going to be in a tricky situation?
Yeah, there's a lot of countries in Asia that have a high, oil intensity in terms of the economy. So they use a lot of oil really to drive, GDP growth. For China, it's the largest oil, importer in the world, and it's more resilient certainly than other countries. Like India, faces a bigger challenge. But I think what we're seeing in China, it's quite interesting. We're seeing China turn down LNG import volumes. Coal production is now at record levels, and so China's really pivoting back to coal, which of course, is a stable, reliable source of energy, but obviously one that doesn't really help, reduce carbon emissions, which the world desperately needs to see happen.